Good morning, Tri-Cities. It's Friday at 9 o'clock, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from Tridec, and this morning we have a very distinguished and honored guest, Dr. Steve Ashby. He's the director of Pacific Northwest National Lab. Good morning, Steve. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Karl. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You bet. It's good to see you virtually. I'm looking forward to having some in-person meetings here coming up in the future, but we appreciate your time this morning and going over some of the amazing things that you guys have going on at the lab. So thanks in advance for your time. I am going to kick us off with our coffee mug thing. And I have a very boring mug because you might be able to tell from my background. I told Steve this isn't my bedroom. I'm at a hotel in Sacramento for a Clean and Prosperous Washington meeting with the California Air Resources Board. We're talking about Cap and Invest program in Washington State that was passed this year. And so David Replog and I from Tridec are down to understand what's going on with this program. Are there opportunities for the Tri-Cities? You know, we hope that, and I'm sure there will be opportunities for the lab and you know, great ways to partner and be able to, you know, move our community and our whole state forward on reducing and eventually, you know, going away from carbon emitting sources. So we're happy to be here. Excited to be in Sacramento. And Steve, how about you? What do you have for a mug or a coffee story this morning?
Well, first I'll just say I'm glad you clarified things. I was a little concerned about your choice of home decor there, but all right, now I know you're in hotels, so that explains a lot. And I also want to say thanks for what Tridec does to really help the community move forward, and you know, taking the time to travel and attend these kind of meetings and all what you do here and what you've done during the pandemic to support businesses. Really appreciate the leadership that you personally provided and that Tridec and the entire team there provide for the community. So thank you so much for that. So I have some boring coffee cups, not nearly as boring as yours. So this one, I'm in the office today, as you can probably tell. Yeah. So this is just my PNNL branded coffee cup because that's what's in the cupboard. And so, but it is with great pride, I can remain caffeinated while I'm at the office. The last time we had the pleasure of one of these, I was at home, my home office. And the mug I usually use there is one I got about a year ago for my 60th birthday. And it just reminds me of you know, passage of time. And as I think I mentioned, you know, just realizing that there's a lot to do and you know, the clock stops for no one. So we'll keep driving forward. So those are my two coffee cup stories for the morning. Sorry, I couldn't be more entertaining with them. No,
I appreciate your passage of time. I think it's something that, you know, we all at some point in our lives wake up one morning and have that same realization. And yeah, it's a great observation. I know that we've talked about it before. I can't remember exactly when you were on before, Steve, but I want to say it's maybe been over a year. But let's just start off with you. Can you give us a little bit about your background? How did you you know, where did you start out and kind of like your research area? And then how did you come to Pacific Northwest National Lab and the Tri-Cities?
Okay, wow, all right. So I grew up in the Bay Area and so not too far from where you're visiting, in Santa Clara, California.
Okay.
And I got my undergraduate degree in computer science and mathematics from Santa Clara University, not too far from home. And then I went off to the University of Illinois, where I earned my PhD in computer science, and really was in the area of computational mathematics, which means we look at ways of solving problems on supercomputers. And so that's what I did for a large part of my career. And I went right from graduate school to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And I was there for 21 years. Had a wonderful career, and that's when I really got to know the labs, of course, and really just the passion I have for the Department of Energy, its missions, and the laboratory system that it stewards. I have the privilege of joining the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in September of 2008. So just had my 13th anniversary. I joined the lab as a deputy director for science and technology, and talking about the passage of time, it's now been 6 years, and it was April of 2015 that I had the honor of being selected to be the director of the laboratory, and I've been in that role, and it's a fantastic job because of the people and the things that we do at this laboratory. And so that's a little bit about my background and how I got from Santa Clara, California to the Tri-Cities and the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory.
Great, Steve. Thank you. And I think, when you joined us last time, it kicked off a series. We've been inviting folks from your team at the lab back for different conversations. And I think the amazing thing that you guys do outside of, the different research areas that have, really these global impacts is there's also research that the lab's doing that has, some local connections or uses. I know that we talked about some of the sensor technology and even some of the things that affect hydroelectric projects or even, fish recovery and study efforts that go on with our local hydroelectric projects. Obviously, the whole energy storage and the grid storage launch pad that we'll talk about more later. But I think that's the really great part is outside of just the huge economic impact that the lab has on our community, the research that you guys are doing every day has these local connections. And I as I'm learning more about the Tri-Cities in my 18, 19 months that I've been here, it just continues to amaze me, the work that you guys do and the way that there is that kind of local nexus that you might not necessarily expect. But let's jump into our conversation. I know you guys just finished your fiscal year. And so I wondered if there was any, milestones or achievements, highlights from fiscal year 21 that you want to share with us to kind of kick off our conversation.
Sure. We did just wrap up the year, and it was a fantastic year in many ways, except for the pandemic. I mean, so if you just look at from the laboratory performance, it was extraordinary. And the credit there, of course, goes to our 5,300 staff, who first and foremost were able to stay remarkably safe during the pandemic, but also remarkably productive. And despite the pandemic and all the restrictions we have, because we're not in full operational mode, we have to still do mostly teleworking, with some exceptions. It was, in fact, a record-breaking year in many ways. So first of all, as maybe some of your audience don't realize, is that the funding we get at the laboratory comes in because our scientists and researchers have to go out and compete for that funding, their proposals, just like in academia, where professors have to go out and write proposals or bring funding in. That's what we have to do. And some of them are long-lived projects where they get reviewed periodically, but it's really what's called soft money. And that really keeps us on our toes and competitive. And our staff brought in a record $1.3 billion in funding last year. So that's proposals that they put out, one, because of the ingenuity of their ideas, and then the various sponsors, mostly Department of Energy sponsors, have said, all right, we're going to fund your idea. And so that'll bring in money that'll keep the lab going for another year. Meanwhile, we're executing on work that we already had committed to us. And that was another record where we actually spent over $1.2 billion, 12% increase from the previous fiscal year. So these are remarkable numbers in any year, let alone a pandemic. And we also saw that our staffing grew to yet another record. We're now at 5,300 staff. We've never had more people working at PNNL than we do now. And these numbers are nice, but I think what's important is to recognize what's behind them. And as I told our staff in a message, what it really means is that our reputation is increasing and our impact is being recognized, and the demand for our staff's many talents are simply growing. And I think that it's a real testament to their creativity, their ability to deliver and to do things that you'd expect of a national lab. And finally, I'll just say they're doing this in an incredibly safe way, not just with respect to the pandemic. We also had our best safety record ever at the laboratory. So that's a little bit at the high level. There's a number of examples of technical successes and things like that we've done. We can talk about a little bit later if you're interested, but I just couldn't be prouder of how the staff have performed during this pandemic and over the past year.
That's amazing. That kind of growth, especially like say during the pandemic, is incredible. Do you, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but within the Department of Energy National Lab System, a lot of the labs, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my perception, I came from Idaho, so Idaho National Lab is very focused on nuclear. They're kind of known as the nuclear lab. They do other things. I know they do a lot of electric vehicle battery testing and biomass things and like that, but they're kind of known as the nuclear lab. And my perception is that Pacific Northwest National Lab has a lot more diversity in the areas that you guys really specialize in. Does that affect, some of these records that you guys have set, because there's so many kind of research areas and science areas that you guys can compete in? Is that part of it, or how do you guys kind of prioritize or work on that mix of different areas?
So that's a simple question, a complicated answer. I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try not to go on too long, but you're right in your observation. There's certain labs that you can really hang a particular moniker around, and it really nicely describes a lot of what they do. And there's different ways you can describe PNNL, but we really, in many ways, we are the most diversified of the DOE national laboratories. If you look at our research portfolio, everything from basic science, where we're particularly known for our work in chemistry, in biology, earth sciences, and data analytics. So those are areas of particular strength for the laboratory from the fundamental discovery perspective, to what we do in the energy area, where certainly you've mentioned it, energy storage, grid modernization, energy efficiency, things along those lines. And then about half the laboratory is national security, and there we do a lot of work in nuclear nonproliferation, understanding what other countries such as Iran or North Korea are trying to do, or their capabilities with respect to developing nuclear weapons, but also in cybersecurity. We're one of the major laboratories in that. But it's a very diverse portfolio that adds up to that $1.2, $1.3 billion in funding. And it serves us well, because one of our challenges as a national laboratory is to steward a set of capabilities over decades, right? That range from a variety of disciplines you'd recognize if you're looking at a university, and steward those, and then make sure you can focus them on the challenges of the day. Whatever's facing our country and our society, those are the problems that we need to work on. And the priorities, of course, are set by the president and funded by Congress. And I think this laboratory has done a remarkable job over its history of really continuing to look a little bit over the horizon, understand what those challenges were, listen to our sponsors, and then be able to show how we can be relevant to those needs. And I think that's how we've been able to stay relevant and to continue to grow over the years. And so depending on who you talk to, they'll either say we're the chemistry lab, we're the climate lab, we're the energy storage lab, we're the non-pro lab. There's a lot of different ways people can describe us, and we happily take all those descriptions. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit there.
Yeah, it really does, and it gives us a better understanding, because I think I think in these webinars that we do, I think that's always something that we're trying to get out, is to have this conversation to help people understand really complex things within our community of the Tri-Cities, and that's a really great description of all the amazing things that you guys do, because everyone, I think, generally knows that the lab's there, but and a lot of times, unless you have a connection, or somebody that works there, a family member or something, people might not know and understand the breadth of areas that you guys cover, for sure. For last year, you talked about some of the new areas that you're working on. Are there any specific areas that you want to share with us this morning, or you kind of talked about the diversity, but are there some new areas or new projects within the areas that you guys cover?
Sure. There's a lot. As I said, we brought in a record amount of new funding into the laboratory, and those all come in different projects. And so I won't go through all of them, but I'll just give you a sampling from some of the work that we do in science, energy, and national security that you might find interesting. And these are all relatively new projects. So one is, I think we all know, we as a society produce a lot of waste. And I think one of the things we try to do, of course, is see if we can recycle a lot of that. And for example, plastic is one of the things that we generate a lot of in this country. And it's increasingly a problem. And we're looking at ways in which we can convert that plastic into useful products, right? And people see a lot of that, but what's not known is that there's a lot of challenges and a lot of energy sometimes goes into converting or recycling that plastic, or what's called as upcycling the plastic into new value-added products. and unfortunately, a lot of plastic that we recycle does, in fact, eventually end up in a landfill because we simply don't have enough ways to use it. So one of the things we're doing, we have a project that some of our chemists want to look at how we can lower the energy cost of converting plastics to turn them into useful fuels and lubricants, leveraging some of the world leading expertise we have in chemistry and something called catalysis and the ability to do that. And it's nice because it really is something most people can relate to, wanting to recycle those plastic bottles into something that we need more of, fuels that are sustainable and bio-friendly. And we're doing that with partners, and you'll see that come up over and over again. We don't do these things alone. In this particular case, we're partnering with colleagues from the University of California, Santa Barbara, Princeton University, and Columbia University. So that's one of the sort of taking our basic chemistries and doing something interesting with it. If you look at another area of energy, we've had a pretty good relationship and partnership with McKinstry and Avista over in Spokane. You may have read about some of those things in the press. Recently, we were supporting an effort by McKinstry to create what they call the 5 smartest blocks on the planet. And really, and there, one of our contributions was how we could take some of our ability to do what we call transactive energy, the ability to monitor energy usage in real time and to communicate to the grid in real time to manage that energy usage. And we contributed that to that project. Just recently, I think it was just last week, in fact, that we were informed by the Department of Energy that McKinstry and PNNL and several other partners were selected for a Connected Communities Award to demonstrate energy efficiency and grid interactive technologies. And here in Spokane, we're going to be looking at taking 125 homes and commercial buildings and retrofitting them to increase their energy efficiency and to serve as distributed energy resources that could provide up to 2.25 megawatts of flexible load and benefits back to the grid. And this is largely going to be focused on benefiting underserved communities. So there's an example of taking some of our power electronics and data analytics capabilities and putting it to play there. The last example I'll give you is what we're doing in national security and taking some of the technologies we developed there and bringing them home. So we all know we had a horrible fire season again. And one of the things we've been working on as part of a so-called First Five Consortium, which is a group of government, industry, and academic experts, is looking how we can use artificial intelligence for disaster response. And in particular here, we took our expertise in AI, which we've developed for a number of national security sponsors, combined it with cloud computing and damage assessment capabilities we had to equip firefighters with real-time information that helped them fight some of those fires. And so we'll continue to refine that tool and deploy it for broader use as we continue to face these horrific fire seasons, which are partially a consequence of climate change and the regional impacts thereof. So those are just 3 examples from what we do in science, energy, and security. And as you can see, some of them are pretty close to home in terms of the impact, getting back to your earlier comment.
Yeah, no, definitely. On the AI and cloud computing for kind of fire management, is there some predictive, like, is that kind of where the artificial intelligence comes in? Is there some predictive modeling that you do, like based on conditions and stuff, like, get ready in this area because it's going to be a hotspot? Is it sort of like that, or is it more about once the fire's burning and managing it?
Well, I believe a lot of it has to do once the fire is burning and you're trying to figure out where it's headed next.
Yeah.
And there what you're doing is you've got a lot of simulations that can come in. You're doing some artificial intelligence to try to analyze a lot of that information quickly.
Yeah.
You're trying to couple that then with what resources the firefighters might have available to them to decide which ones to deploy where. These are all things where you really do need the power of cloud computing, because these firefighters are not sitting there with a connection back to a supercomputer. So you have to go to the cloud, and that gets back to some of our wireless communication capabilities that we've been developing. And to bring all this together. So really, one of the strengths we have is in systems engineering. We can take the disparate capabilities what you're doing in AI or machine learning over here, or maybe cloud computing over there, and then you've got some assessment tool. And what we're proud of is our ability to take a step back there. How do I integrate these capabilities to provide something that's useful in an operational setting, especially one that may be very demanding, whether it's fighting a fire, maybe it's looking at, for example, we've also done work of looking at storm damage during hurricanes, providing real-time information on to utilities about the status of their assets. We did that for Hurricane Harvey a couple of years back for the Texas utilities, and we were able to tell them and whether their capabilities were under were flooded or not. And but bringing it all together in an operationally effective way is really a strength of this laboratory. And that's one of the things you look for from PNNL, is to go beyond just the research and the publications, to bring it together to make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, that's a great example, because I think even, as we all experience in the Tri-Cities, even though we're not directly in the forest, our proximity to so many forests and the smoke, that has these impacts. I know we were at a local winery the other day, and they were talking about, smoke has an impact on growing grapes and stuff. So there is, we are, because of our proximity and location, that's a great connection. So to be able to, limit some of those, huge local connection. On the plastic recycling and catalyst technology, I think that's really interesting, because I know a number of years ago, a lot of the plastics we recycled in the US were shipped overseas for processing. And then I think because of some of the trade relations and stuff, that those markets ended. And so I think a lot, like local municipalities, a lot of times are faced with, we've got everybody to accept recycling, and people, community members embrace it, and we're doing it. But then, just like so many systems that we work in, you got to have that market demand. Like, what do you do with the products that hasn't been there for a while? So that's really exciting. And as usual, and Steve, we look forward to TriDec and all of our board and our members to work with Pacific Northwest National Lab to be able to find areas, are there ways that we can connect with companies that you guys may be working with in an area like that? Because, you look at plastic recycling, because of our proximity, that could be something that we could, help in. Can we help attract a company? Can we help build a company? Kind of go vertical with that research that starts at the lab, but then, can we do these other things? So obviously, any opportunity that we have to do that, I think those are great opportunities for our whole community.
Well, absolutely. I think, with respect to that particular example of, the recycling, right, a lot of it has to do with the ability to lower the energy costs, and to do this in an economically effective way. And that's another strength we have. We actually have economists, what we call technical economists on staff, who can understand some of these issues, because that matters. When you're talking to a company, right, they care about some of these things, but they also have to make a profit to stay in business, or if they got shareholders, they're responsible to them. And so I think our ability to also understand the market relevance of some of the work that we do is attractive. And so working with TriDec, if there's companies that you can come in and leverage their proximity to the lab, we're happy to be partners with them. And I talked about all those research proposals that our staff wrote and won, but they're also publishing over, I think it's over 1,100 publications every year in different journals, getting our ideas out there. But they're also going out and having a record of invention, more than one every business day. In fact, I think we're up now, I think it's well over 300 now. And we're up to about 100 patents a year that our staff are earning. And that means it's not just the research, but we know how to turn these things and people into products and things that people want to license the technology from us. Yeah. It usually then leads to an ongoing collaboration, because they want to understand how to best exploit that technology. And so we're proud that when you look at our history, I think we're over 90 companies can trace their technology or people to PNNL over time. A large fraction of those companies are still in business, including many right here in Washington State, and a few here in Eastern Washington. And so we're eager to work with companies to understand how they can take the fruits of our research, which after all were funded by the US taxpayer, and turn that into products and services they can make money on and employ Americans.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I think that's an important point to make is that, like you said, you're not just doing like kind of theoretical research or things that don't have these practical applications. You're doing so many projects that do have practical applications, but then creating intellectual property is really great. That shows that you're doing the research, you're having the findings, but then even taking to that next step of patenting it, that there is this, proprietary intellectual property that is really the basis for companies, starting and growing and doing something new. That's to your point, I think personally, that's a good use for our taxpayer dollars, because, R&D has to happen somewhere. And if companies don't develop it themselves, for all of this IP to come out of the lab is huge and creates so many opportunities for all of us.
Yeah, no, we're very proud of what we do there, and just the ability to stay focused on that. And we do everything from that basic research to that intellectual property development to deployment of technologies on the national security side. So it's that breadth of activities at the lab that I think really make us interesting and allow us to have such a broad impact in so many fields.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about the new research and some of those examples you just gave us on the research and new projects that are coming in, but it's my understanding that you guys have had some real steady growth on campus as well, and some of your physical structures and physical plant. Do you have some highlights you want to share with us, Steve?
Sure. There has been a lot of construction on campus over the last several years. And we're eager for our staff to be able to get back in larger numbers. Right now, we're limited to about, I think it's about 1,700 staff come on campus any day, usually do classified work or work in the labs. And most of our staff are still teleworking. And so, but when everybody's able to come back on, I think they're going to be somewhat taken aback by the transformation of the campus, even over just the last year and a half. If you drive down the bypass and between Battelle Boulevard and Horn Rapids, you'll notice a construction of the Energy Sciences Center. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment if you're interested, but that's a $90 million facility that the Department of Energy is supporting. It was funded by Congress. We appreciate that. But that's one of several new facilities that we have going in there, and it is quite an amazing facility that we'll dedicate on the 29th of this month, in fact, a week from today. And so I can tell you a bit more about that and the dedication here in a moment. But in addition, right on its heels, as that building's dedicated next week, and we start moving into that, right next to it, you're also going to see then work being done to prep for groundbreaking of a $75 million grid storage launch pad. And the Energy Sciences Center is going to be all about the chemistry, material science, computing work that we do to support a lot of our fundamental science. And then right next to it is the grid storage launch pad, where we're going to develop prototypes about new energy storage solutions, especially those needed for the electric grid, which allow us to incorporate renewables into the grid, which also provide greater resiliency. It's a real strength of the laboratory. And so right there, just the point you're making, Karl, a moment ago about the breadth of our work. So right next to each other, we're going to have our scientists and engineers working and literally taking the research results from one building over the next facility to the prototypes. And in there, they're going to be collaborating with industry to test different types of technologies out, look at them all the way up to 100 kilowatt scale batteries, test those out, and then partner with industry to commercialize that technology. And so it's pretty amazing. And I think it's just quite nice that it will really be a physical manifestation of what I think makes this laboratory great, which is our ability to collaborate with academia and other researchers in the basic fundamental science that's needed, and then to ensure there's a transition of that over to industry to really capitalize on it and make a difference out of it. So those are a couple of things we've got going on. We expect to break ground on the launch pad in February of next year, and complete that in probably late 2023. Before those two buildings, we had a number of buildings going up, about one every year for a couple of years, getting at a smaller scale, but providing specialized capabilities for work that we do in the grid or engineering support and in chemistry, and also just a place to facilitate on-site training and meetings. But looking ahead, we're also recognizing that we've got work that we need to do in terms of our classified work is growing, and so we need to make sure we have the appropriate facilities to support those researchers. We have work in the 300 area that we continue to do to support our national security clients, as well as to support the important work going on at Hanford and the cleanup with our radiochemical processing laboratory. And so we're working with sponsors to secure a large investment in those capabilities and look at what we need to do to keep that vibrant for the future. And one of the more exciting things I'll talk about also is something we're calling N0. And this stands for net zero emissions with energy resilient operations 24/7. And it is our commitment to make PNNL the first net emissions free laboratory as early as 2030, if we get the resources we're hoping to get to do that. And we can do that because of several things. One, of where we're located in Washington State, and Washington State being on the forefront of clean energy technology, and the Seattle law that's going to guarantee that we're going to have 100% clean energy in the not too distant future. Second thing, if you look at the campus we have at PNNL, we're proud that in addition to all this construction, we've taken pretty good care of the buildings we've also got. So we've got low deferred maintenance. We've instrumented our buildings with sensor technologies so that we can analyze it and manage those resources. And so we're really ready now to take all this, integrate it, and reduce our energy usage and emissions even more. And so we're looking forward to that. So that's some of the construction you're going to start seeing, and some of the things happening. It is pretty amazing the amount of dirt being moved and steel being put up, and you'll see people moving to laboratories, and we do look forward to having people back on campus and visitors as well. So let me pause there, and if there's something more you want to add, I'm happy to dive into it. You can tell I'm pretty excited about it because it really reflects the future of the laboratory in this community.
Well, and I just wanted to say that on your N0 initiative, even like what David and I are here in Sacramento to do is to learn about these steps that Washington State's taking on the Cap and Invest program. But I think, you mentioned tours, and I think that that's something that we could really work on, because I think our local businesses and industries in Tri-Cities, as they understand, this new legislation and the new regulations that come out of it, I think an opportunity, just thinking out loud, would be able to maybe highlight some of the technology that PNNL has implemented in the future for your net zero, to show this is what it looks like, this is how it works. Here's actually some benefits and some savings for businesses, because I think that that's something that we're realizing is just that awareness. And then, I think we all like to see something that you can go and touch. And so I think in the future, that would be a great opportunity to be able to not only showcase and highlight the lab, but then also to have that, kind of to show local businesses, the local community, like this is what it looks like to operate at net zero in the future. And I think that's really critically important, even beyond everything else that you guys are able to do for our community.
Well, and in that area, when we've been looking at this initiative, and it's resonating a lot with our staff, as you can imagine, are really committed to this kind of clean energy future. A big part of it, of course, is what we can do here in Richland, what we can do at our campus in Sequim, Washington, and everywhere else we operate. And there's a lot of technology we develop or that we're going to get from partners, test those out, and work on that. But a big part of it also is helping others to learn from our experience. So exactly what you're talking about, Karl, is we're very keen on what we can do here to take what we've learned and the lessons that we've learned and technologies we've developed, and help others to incorporate that into their operations. And so we'd love to start here in the Tri-Cities, within the state, within the region, and do that. And I know this is a priority for DOE. They really want to see how the labs are helping others towards this clean energy future. And so it's absolutely something that we have in mind. We think there's work going on with others in this area who have equal commitment. Many large firms throughout the state have committed to net zero, and we want to learn from them as well. And we think that there's smaller organizations that perhaps don't have the resources but have the commitment. and we can maybe help them a bit along the way, whether it's a company, a school, underserved community. These are things we're looking at. We're starting to put together an engagement plan, but one step at a time. We got a little bit of work, and certainly we need to get out of this pandemic before we're going to have some of those people back on site. And then we're certainly happy to show off some of the things that we're doing. And meanwhile, we've got some virtual tours and coming up and things like that that people can take advantage of.
Yeah, and I was reminded of that as we were talking about this, Steve. But and I should have done better research because I don't have the name of the program right in front of me. But you guys have been doing this series of virtual tours. I know I've enjoyed 5 or 6 of them, and I took a virtual tour around some of the robotic technologies. I know that applies to tank management, for the Hanford cleanup mission. Hydrogen production was a really great one, and I think I've been in 4 or 5 other ones. They're like an hour at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, as I recall. But I've learned a lot, and I think it's a great way, to your point about the pandemic, until we can safely come back to in-person tours and visits. It's been a great way. I've learned a lot in it, and I think you guys are doing a great job in that.
Well, I want to give a shout out to our community affairs and protocol team. Right, usually they're extraordinarily busy hosting in-person visits to the laboratory. Sponsors coming in, different groups, and over the past couple of years, of course, we haven't been able to do that as we try to keep our staff and the campus safe. But we recognize there's still a need to engage our sponsors and various stakeholders. And so they came up with this idea of we've done community lectures on different topics, COVID and things like that. But we realized we could do these virtual tours. In fact, we did one for the Secretary of Energy when she had her first virtual visit to the laboratory. And we realized that was a lot of work, but we're able to give her a pretty good feel. It's not as good as being there in person, but a sense to come on, meet some of the people behind it and see some of the things. And so our team worked with our research staff, developed some of these scripts and tours. And I've also watched several of them, and they're well done. And it is a chance for us to really introduce more, not just the community here, but really they can be watched anywhere, right? For people to learn more about what we're doing at PNNL with taxpayer funds, right? And I think this is maybe one of the few benefits we'll get out of COVID long-lasting is that we recognize that even post-pandemic, we're not going to be able to have thousands of people come on and do tours, right? That's not the kind of operation we have in terms of just open to the general public, but we would like them to understand more what we're doing. And I think this ability to continue with these virtual tours and engagements is something we'll be committed to. We appreciate the fact that we're able to talk a little bit about the work we do in a monthly column that we have in the Herald and others, because we want to demystify the work that we do in science and engineering in general. Those of us who work in the laboratory have a real passion for the power of science and engineering and technology to serve and transform society. And we need to do a better job of communicating why that matters to our neighbors, to the citizens and taxpayers who fund this work. And I think these kind of tours are one great way of doing it, and they're kind of fun as well sometimes. So for all the inner geeks out there.
I think that's well said, and I've really enjoyed them. It reminds me of something I think we talked about before, but I wanted to bring it up and highlight it, and that's the internships that the lab's able to do. And I know, as I recall, maybe you can give us more details on it, that even with COVID, even with working remotely, you guys were still able to engage young students in your internship program, even doing virtual work. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Steve?
Sure, that's another great success of Office of STEM Education and research organizations and groups. We typically, prior to the pandemic, would host somewhere in the order of 1,000 undergraduate and graduate students in a variety of programs and projects at the laboratory. And it's something we do because we all have that real passion for STEM at the laboratory, and we want to share that passion with others. We have a number of programs that reach out into schools, but also then just giving some of those students a chance to get to learn about the laboratory and perhaps pursue a career in STEM and a career at the lab. And so we have those internships. When the pandemic hit, we realized we couldn't do it in person. But we really did not want to lose the continuity in developing a cohort after cohort of students and keeping in touch, right? Because sometimes we'll have the same student back 2 or 3 years as we develop a relationship with that student, so that if they're graduating and looking for a job, they'll consider PNNL or another DOE lab. Or if they're going on, to graduate school, we can keep that connection. And then when they're done with graduate school, come back and do that. And this is something that personally resonates with me, because I spent 3 internships when I was in graduate school. And if it weren't for those internships, I'd not know anything about DOE or the national labs. But because of those internships, I decided early on that's where I wanted to make my career. And it's worked out reasonably well. And I've had a great and very satisfying career with DOE. And we want to make that opportunity available to more and more students. And so we have those internships. They're virtual. They're still very successful. We have great, I think it's 97, 98% positive feedback from the participants. Just this week, we had a virtual career fair, if you will. Over 2,000 students from around the country came in and learned more about PNNL. So we're really trying to get that word out, because we're growing.
Yeah.
People want what we're doing, and we need to make sure we have that staff coming on board. So yes, we're very committed to those internships and making sure that we develop and nurture that next generation of talent that we need here at the laboratory and in other areas in endeavor for our country. Thanks for that question about the internships.
No, and well, I just wanted to take it one step further and talk about the local impact of the lab, and I think that that's a great example. When you're hosting the virtual career fair for 2,000 students throughout the country, or even potentially international, I think that's something that's really struck me in the time I've been here in the Tri-Cities, is where the lab is attracting these very, very talented, very, very educated scientists and researchers, and your team members that you're bringing in the lab. It adds so much to our community, and not just now as you guys are growing so much to describe, Steve, but really the history of the lab. Bringing in this sector of our community adds to our diversity. It affects us so many different ways. The partnership that you guys have with our local school districts. Our school districts here are amazing, and I know there's a big influence just the lab directly, but then your employees, your researchers that have kids in school, affects our community. And it really makes our community much more, I think, strong and diverse than it would be otherwise. That really sometimes, I think a lot of times we take for granted, but I think it's important that we talk about it and highlight it, because it really is something else that, that this investment, this federal investment in the research that you guys do at the lab, has these bigger impacts for our community. I just wanted to bring that out and highlight it, because it really is such a great part about our quality of life and everything else that we enjoy in the Tri-Cities.
Well, appreciate that. I mean, Battelle's had the privilege of operating the laboratory for since its inception, and we're very proud of the contributions we make to the community, and very grateful for what we receive back from the community. Here in Sequim and the other places we operate in Portland and Seattle and Maryland, where we have a lot of our staff. But you're right, most of our 5,300 staff are here in the Tri-Cities and call it home. And I think we have a wonderful community. I have 2 children. They're now out of the house and getting on with their lives, but they benefit from the fine schools we have here, and we're proud to be part of that community. Our staff want to give back to it, and we think that we do help enrich the community a little bit, right, through the diversity. We recognize that in order to do the quality of research and development that we're called upon, we need multidisciplinary teams and we need diverse teams. There's no way we can do this unless we're really opening ourselves up and looking at the contributions that everyone can make to a particular problem. And that's whether it's science and engineering, the support staff who enable that work, the safety engineers who make sure we conduct it safely. It takes all that work to get things done. The people who are bringing in the funding and managing that responsibly, the communications efforts, the underlying IT. It really takes a large team to do this. And we're very proud of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as we do that, and as the community continues to grow, it makes it easier for us to attract people. And these are high-paying jobs that we're offering people, and it means that those people want to have nice restaurants and things like that, and helps many of our businesses go out and have more successful businesses, more profits, so when we look at that, we're pretty proud of the economic impact we have at the laboratory as well, and happy to comment on that if you wish.
No, I think that's a great summary, and I'll just say that at Tridec we really appreciate the investment that you make in us, both financially, but then also access to your team. There's so many initiatives that we have at Tridec that are focused on really to help grow our economy locally. Just access to your team, the partnership, the learning, the understanding is a huge impact in what we do. And amongst our economic development peers throughout the state or throughout the country, it's very unique having the lab here because it really differentiates us, and it gives us opportunities in so many of these critical growth areas that relate to energy, climate change, all the things that we've been talking about today. I want to say give us a huge leg up. So I do want to highlight that, Steve, and we really appreciate that investment and that partnership that we have with you. Looks like we're down to about 13 minutes. I wanted to make sure we got back to ESC and the dedication link, so we got that. I know we could talk about that all day because you guys really are just incredible asset for our community. But wanted to make sure we got back to the ESC dedication coming up next week and give you a chance to talk about that to invite folks that might be tuning in today.
Sure. So the ESC is the Energy Sciences Center, and it's the culmination of a $90 million investment. It's coming out of the Department of Energy's Office of Science. Let's see, in 1 week and about 1 hour, we'll be having that dedication event. So it'll begin at 11:15 a.m. on Friday, October 29th. So we ask you to join us. I believe the invitation will be in the chat window, and we're getting it out there. Tune in around 11 o'clock to get a good seat for this virtual event. Very pleased that we're going to have Secretary Granholm will be providing some remarks, as will Governor Inslee, because the state was very generous in contributing $8 million for some highly specialized equipment that we'll be using in collaboration with our great partners at the University of Washington and Washington State University. And so we'll have this chance really to hear from the Secretary, the Governor. We have some other high-level DOE officials from the Office of Science who will be speaking to this, as well as contributed remarks from our members of our congressional delegation. And although we can't do it physically, we have to do it virtually. A couple of us will be on site, do that physical ribbon cutting, and then we'll virtually open the doors, and Lou Terminello, our Associate Lab Director for Physical and Computational Sciences, whose staff will be moving into this building for the most part, will then lead us on a virtual tour of that building, and it is amazing. The company that has done this for us has just done, Harvey Cleary has just done an amazing job in the design and construction of this facility, and we're very proud of it and look forward to what it's going to do. Getting back to the impact, I mean, the science that we're going to do in that building is just amazing. But I also want to relate it to what it does for this community, right? That $90 million is going to allow us to continue research, to continue staffing, things like that. But that construction project brought in 250 construction workers during their peak. And many of those will continue on to support the grid storage launch pad. So there's several years of good paying construction jobs here in the Tri-Cities. And those construction folks, they need to eat somewhere and sleep somewhere, right? And so they're generating business for the local community. In addition to that, we have another 100 smaller companies that support not just those projects, but other work. And that's another $20 to $40 million a year going right into the community. So the ESC, it means something to this community while it's being constructed. But then when you look beyond it, the researchers it's going to house and the impact is going to bring people in. A big part of the ESC is around collaboration. It's going to bring researchers from around the world to the Tri-Cities. They're going to have to stay in our hotels, eat in our restaurants, right? The ESC is going to, need supplies that we're going to buy from local businesses and all those kind of things. So, we're very, we appreciate and value the science and the engineering that come out of the facility. And that's certainly what DOE looks like, looks forward to, but we also recognize, that it's going to be a real engine for economic growth here in the Tri-Cities as well. And it just lends to what the lab does, right? It's a $500 million payroll, mostly spent here in the Tri-Cities. And so we're very proud of that and very appreciative for the support we get from the community. So please mark it in your calendars. Tune in at 11 a.m. Friday the 29th to hear from Secretary Granholm and Governor Inslee and a few other dignitaries talking about the Energy Sciences Center at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. All right, I think I got my plug in. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great. I'm already signed up and looking forward to it. And as we come out of COVID, looking forward to the chance to even be there in person. But this virtual tours sounds incredible. So looking forward to next Friday for sure. Steve, this has been great. We've talked about the amazing growth that you've had at the lab, the new research areas. You've given us some great examples of that. And then what I really appreciate is we've talked about that community connection, community impact, how vital and critical Pacific Northwest National Lab is to our community in the Tri-Cities. Let's spend a little bit of time as we wrap up here talking about the future. Like what do you see any new research areas or project areas that you guys are gearing up for, or looking at research opportunities that maybe you could share with us?
Well, I think I've shared a few of those along the way.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at what we're doing, I think the work that we're doing in fundamental science around chemistry and earth sciences will continue. And I think is important because we really do need to understand our planet, its evolution and our impact on that planet. What we're doing, and how we can mitigate some of those impacts of climate change, whether they're naturally occurring or caused by human activity. And so we'll continue the work in there, in that area. A lot of that has to get around to looking at the resilience of various ecosystems. So some relatively new work that we're doing is in the area of so-called terrestrial aquatic ecosystems. It's a fancy word, but just think of river systems or the coastal systems are examples where a lot of people like to live, where we increasingly turn to it for production of energy, and we'd like to do that in a sustainable way. And so we have research projects aimed at understanding how we can do that. And some of these are in collaboration with Washington State areas as well as DOE. So it's a nice confluence of interest in looking at sustainable energy production. So that's a big area for us. Certainly, there's also a lot of work we're doing to achieve net zero. You've heard the president speak about his commitment from a national perspective. The secretary has said that she wants DOE to lead by example. And so, I'd like us to really be at the forefront of helping her to achieve that goal. And so you're going to see us doing a lot of work in things that relate to helping us reduce the impact of our operations on the community. If you look at it in national security, we'll continue to really be the go-to lab in understanding issues around nuclear nonproliferation. Just in the news, right? Last week, you saw some missile launches coming out of North Korea as they continue to modernize their capability. We're one of several labs the government relies on to understand their technical capabilities, and our staff do an amazing job on that. And then you look at airline security. We're starting to get back on airlines, right? Everybody knows the PNNL salute that you do at the airport. Okay. Well, one thing we still have to do at the airport is take our darn shoes off. Well, we're working on a new generation of technology that allow you to keep your shoes on at the airport. All right.
Wow.
Right. And the generation after that would allow you just to walk through the scanner without stopping. All right.
Wow.
These are some of the things that we're working on. And of course, in cyber. All right. We read around ransomware attacks and things like that. What are we doing to keep the grid cyber secure, to help basically just deal with this horrendous problem. These are some of the things that we're working on at the laboratory. So,
well, that's, as you went through those, it just reminded me of a discussion we had yesterday, within talking about the way that California does they call it cap and trade. Washington, we call it cap and invest, but it appears that they have a pretty complex model where they're looking at, carbon emissions, especially like in their industrial programs, for example, and they're just doing now kind of an analysis of their model, the input kind of outputs. And, as you described the model that you guys are working on, or, utilizing artificial intelligence and cloud computing in the fire management scenario. And I just think of, as Washington goes forward on this, and I think that's what we're learning. There's a lot of work to do. It's probably going to take, they think, a couple of years to work on the rules and regulations, but it just strikes me that, there's probably opportunities with the work that you're already doing at the lab where they could utilize some of those, supercomputing capacities, and then some of the other things that you've developed for these other situations, but bring that analysis like strength to bear on, this new era that we're moving into in Washington. Just strikes me that there's going to be opportunities there as well. That when we talk about these local impacts of the work you're doing, probably some more work to be done there, I would assume.
Yeah, no, we do have a lot of that analytical capability that we can lend to that effort for the benefit of the state.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're down to about 3 minutes. Is there anything else that we haven't kind of talked about? I mean, this has been amazing. We've covered a lot of ground in an hour, but anything that you want to add that we've left off?
Well, I guess one thing I want to end a little bit with where I began. And you asked, you commented on the great year we had, and I attributed it to our staff. And I want to end there. It's easy to get enamored of all the technology and the widgets and the scientific results that come out of the laboratory, and those are impressive, and that's what our sponsors look to us to do. But it's the 5,300 people that we have at this laboratory who make that happen. It's their commitment to their sponsors and to our country and its needs that really drives this laboratory. And it's something I'm just so incredibly proud of, to look at how they've been able to pivot and adapt during this pandemic, how they've given them themselves to support one another at work, but also in the community. Very generous in terms of contributions they've made of their time and their own money to help people in need. And really, it's those staff who make the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory the special place it is. And I'm just very grateful of what we're doing, what they're doing for us, for the country. We look forward to having more and more of them back, but we're also realizing that we're going to learn from this pandemic, and we're going to be moving into a hybrid existence after this. And working with staff, we realize that there's going to be a new way in which many of us work. This kind of interaction is going to continue indefinitely, right? And it is a force multiplier, and we're going to have staff. We're going to be in a hybrid mode, and we're going to work with them to strike that right balance between work and life, and how they can be productive regardless of where they are. But we do look forward to having many more of them back on campus to see some of the transformation there, and also to thank them. We sent a small gift to staff earlier this year just to thank them. We really had wanted to have a in-person function, and we couldn't, but we look forward to when we can do that. So, to the staff members who may watch this, thank you very much for what you're doing. We really appreciate it.
That's so well said. And I think that for all of us during the pandemic, I think hopefully that's something that we've all learned, is to appreciate each other, because as we use technology like we're using today to have these conversations and to have these discussions, I think it's shown us how important really we are to each other within organizations, as we do our job, our families, and then our broader community. But I think that's really well said, Steve. And I just am continually amazed by you and your team and the things that you bring to our community, the opportunities that we all have because you're here, and all that we work on together. And just look forward to more opportunities that will come up. Really appreciate your time this morning. This has been a great discussion. It's always good to see you even virtually. Look forward to our next time together. Maybe after the pandemic, we can have a cup of coffee or something. So thanks for your time today.
Look forward to it, Karl. Thank you so much for all that you and trying to do for us.
Okay. well, I look forward to seeing you next Friday at 11, right, for the ESC. So we'll be there and we'll all be tuning
All
in.
right. Fantastic.
Okay.
See you all there. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Steve.